Who gives away her bread before even ordering her meal and thanks the child, not the man across the table? That's exactly what Ellie Morales did. She wasn't looking for love. She wasn't even looking for him. She just needed a warm meal after a long shift and agreed to a blind date her friend signed her up for, mostly for the food. But she didn't know the quiet boy beside her was the son of the man who owned the entire restaurant. And that this dinner was never just a date, it was a quiet test to see who still had a kind heart when no one was watching. What followed was not a Cinderella story. There was no glass slipper, no golden invitation. Just a plastic lunchbox, a toy car, and a question whispered by a child that changed everything. Can we keep her? Before we dive into the story, comment below where you're watching from. Enjoy the story, everyone. Ellie Morales hadn't eaten a proper meal in 3 days. It wasn't because she didn't want to, she just never had time. Or energy. Or leftovers from her third job to sneak home. Her mornings started at a cafe where she poured coffee for people in blazers who didn't look her in the eye. By afternoon, she was packing boxes in a warehouse that smelled like cardboard and metal fatigue. And 2 nights a week, she helped at a local community center, mostly folding blankets or wiping crayon off plastic tables. Ellie never complained. That was her mother's rule: don't let them know you're hungry. They might feed you, but they'll never respect you again. So when her best friend Mariana messaged her, "I signed you up for a blind date at Leora." "You're welcome." Ellie didn't argue. She stared at the message while stirring powdered creamer into burnt coffee, wondering what kind of person said "you're welcome" before the thank you. Then again, it was Leora, the kind of upscale place with crystal water glasses and chairs that didn't wobble. She didn't own a dress fancy enough for Leora, but she had a clean blouse, the good pair of jeans with only one small tear, and a coat she'd inherited from her grandmother. That would have to do. Luis Cavano stood on the mezzanine above the dining floor, watching the tables like he always did. To the staff, he was just a quiet manager with a master key and a sharp eye for undercooked risotto. No one knew he owned not just this restaurant, but 12 more across the city. He preferred it that way. After his wife died, the attention became unbearable. Headlines like "Widowed Restaurateur Raises Son Alone" or "Who Will Win Cavano's Heart and Fortune" cluttered his inbox. Everyone he dated seemed to already have a price tag or a plan. Now Luis kept things simple. He didn't date. He didn't socialize. But one night, after hearing his 6-year-old son Nico whisper, "Maybe we could get someone who's kind, not fancy," Luis decided to try again. Not the apps. Not the photos. Just a table, a seat, and his son. If a woman could sit with Nico for 5 minutes without checking her phone, making a face, or asking where's the real guy, then maybe, just maybe, she deserved more. So far, 5 women had failed. One walked out after 2 minutes. Another asked Nico if he had a quiet setting. Now came number 6. Ellie arrived 6 minutes early. The hostess greeted her with a tight smile, the kind that slid across your face like plastic wrap. "Blind date." Ellie nodded. "Name's Ellie. I think the reservation is under." "Matt?" The hostess blinked. "Right this way." They led her to a small table near the window where a boy sat quietly, drawing on a paper menu with the complimentary crayons. Ellie paused. Hi." The boy didn't look up. "Are you waiting for someone?" Still no reply. The hostess cleared her throat. "He's with Mr. Cavano. Your date is running late." Ellie smiled awkwardly and sat down across from the boy. "Well, I guess it's just us for now." No phone. No menu. Just silence and a child who clearly wasn't expecting her. After a moment, the waiter brought a bread basket. Ellie reached for it, then paused. She broke off the crusty end piece, the best one, and held it out. "You look hungrier than me," she said softly. The boy hesitated. Then, without a word, he took it. A slow, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. Upstairs, Louis stood frozen. He hadn't told the staff to do this. Hadn't staged anything. But watching Ellie in a second-hand coat offering her only bread to a stranger's child did something to him that no elegant speech or styled photo ever had. She didn't know who he was. She didn't even know who the boy was. But she had looked at Nico first. Not as an obstacle. Not as a test. Just as a person. And for the first time in months, Luis felt something he hadn't dared name. Hope. The bread didn't last long. Nico ate it in 3 slow bites, savoring each one like it was a secret. Ellie didn't mind. She leaned back, watching him carefully, not with pity, but with interest, the way you'd watch a squirrel inch closer to your hand in the park. Respectfully. Quietly. Patiently. I used to draw like that, she said, nodding toward his crayon sketch. Only I wasn't very good. My trees always looked like broccoli, and my sons had faces. Still no reply. But Nico's crayon slowed, paused. Are you an artist? She asked softly. The boy shook his head. Well, I think you are, she said anyway. Upstairs, Luis leaned forward against the railing. Nico didn't usually talk to strangers. Not even teachers. He answered questions in nods, glances, or, when pressed, a barely audible, I don't like that. It wasn't shyness. It was precision. Nico didn't waste words on people who didn't earn them. But now he wasn't turning away. He wasn't shrinking. He was listening. Luis signaled to Marco, the maitre d', who approached quietly. Send over a kid's menu, Luis said. And tell the chef to make the butter pasta with the star-shaped carrots. She's staying. Ellie tapped the table gently. You know, I don't really know who I'm meeting. Just that my friend said he's tall and allergic to shellfish. You don't look allergic to anything. Nico's lips twitched. She smiled. I'm Ellie, by the way. And you are. The boy looked at her, really looked, then simply said, Nico. Her expression lit up. Nico. That's a strong name. You don't need a last name when you've got that kind of cool factor. He looked down again. But his shoulders relaxed. A waiter arrived, setting a glass of water in front of her, followed by a small plate of pasta in front of Nico. Oh wow, Ellie said, eyes widening. You get the good stuff. Nico gently pushed the plate toward the center. Sharing range. Ellie chuckled. Are you sure? Okay, but I'm warning you, I'm dangerous when I'm hungry. She took one forkful. Closed her eyes. Oh wow. That's illegal levels of good. Nico took another bite too. They ate in companionable silence, passing the breadstick basket back and forth like they'd done it for years. Luis watched, unable to move. He'd seen women bring iPads to distract Nico. Seen them ignore him entirely or treat him like a checkpoint in a video game. If I can survive the kid, I get the man. But Ellie just was. No angle. No charm campaign. Just one tired woman and one tired boy sharing a meal like it was the most natural thing in the world. Luis wanted to go down there. Wanted to sit beside them, take Nico's hand, and tell her something. Anything. But instead, he walked back to the kitchen and leaned against the cold metal counter, willing his chest to slow its rhythm. Ellie wiped her mouth with a napkin. So, mystery man's still not here, huh? Nico shrugged. Typical, she muttered, then smiled. Well, I guess that makes you my date tonight. Nico raised an eyebrow. You're a way better listener than most men I've met. He reached for another breadstick. Broke it in half. Offered her a piece. She took it solemnly, then whispered, that's basically a proposal, you know. He smirked, small but real. Meanwhile, Luis asked the pastry chef to prepare the soft ginger cookie hearts Nico liked. The ones his late wife used to bake every Christmas. He hadn't let them on the menu in 2 years. Tonight, he didn't care. When he returned to the dining floor, Marco handed him a note. She left this, he said. Luis stared at the folded piece of paper. His chest tightened. 10 minutes earlier, Ellie had looked at her phone. Time was running short. Warehouse shift started in 40 minutes and the bus didn't wait. She didn't want to go. But Bills didn't ask if your evening was sweet. She stood slowly, pulled a pen from her coat pocket, the only thing always there, and scribbled on a napkin. To Nico, thank you for sharing your bread, your dinner, and your silence. You made my whole day better. Here's my number in case you want to draw again sometime. Ellie. Then, as gently as she'd come, she slipped out the front door without looking back. Luis unfolded the napkin. He read the words once. Then again. It wasn't a message for him. Not even a flirtation. It was a thank you letter to his son. He held the napkin like it might disintegrate in his hands. Nico wandered up a few minutes later, a chocolate smudge on his cheek. Luis crouched. Did you like her? Nico nodded. Luis smiled, then held up the napkin. She left this for you. Nico read it. Slowly. Then folded it back up and placed it carefully inside his hoodie pocket. She was kind, he said quietly. Luis nodded. She was. Nico glanced up. Can we see her again? Luis hesitated. His fingers brushed the edge of the napkin. Yes, he said finally. We can. But he didn't text her. Not that night. Not yet. Something about the way she walked away, free, real, untouched by wealth or expectation, made him pause. She didn't know who they were. But somehow she'd already seen them more clearly than anyone in years. Luis didn't sleep that night. Not because he was restless, but because for the first time in years, something inside him felt unfinished. It wasn't attraction exactly. It was interest. Gentle. Awake. A quiet curiosity about a woman who didn't ask about stocks or summer homes, only whether his son liked drawing trees with faces. He stood in the kitchen long after Nico went to bed, the folded napkin still in his pocket. At midnight, he finally placed it on the counter. Flattened it. Read it again. Thank you for sharing your bread, your dinner, and your silence. He almost called. Almost. But something about the note, the care of it, made him stop. A woman like that deserved more than a text at midnight from a man who hadn't even introduced himself. The next evening, over tomato soup and toasted bread, Nico spoke without looking up. She said boxes don't judge. Luis paused. What? Nico set his spoon down. She said she had to go to the warehouse. That boxes don't care if you look tired. Luis stared at his son. That means, Nico added seriously, she's kind. We should bring her something that says thank you. Luis blinked. It wasn't a demand. It wasn't even a question. It was a suggestion. Soft. Earnest. From the same child who barely let people hold his hand, let alone speak for someone. Luis didn't ask for more. He stood up, walked to his office upstairs, and opened the reservation log. The napkin Ellie left had her number. But more importantly, earlier that week, the hostess had quietly packed up the rest of her pasta when she ran off to catch her bus. One of the staff, a kind girl named Anna, had offered to send it to her the next day. Luis searched the delivery records. And there it was. E. Morales, North Pine Logistics, Dock B, delivery requested at 10:30 p.m. The restaurant had sent a meal. And Ellie had accepted it. At 10:15 the next night, Luis parked his car in front of the warehouse. He wore a gray coat and no tie. No watch. Just a paper bag in hand, warm, heavy, and filled with pasta, soup, and 2 heart-shaped ginger cookies Nico had insisted on including. The building was dull, square, and silent. Fluorescent lights flickered near the entrance. Luis hesitated for a moment, then stepped inside. No one looked at him. Why would they? Forklifts buzzed between rows of stacked boxes. Somewhere, a clock radio played muffled pop music. The air smelled like cardboard, metal, and exhaustion. And then he saw her. Ellie. Hair tied back with a pencil jammed through the knot. A safety vest over her hoodie. Hands lifting a crate that looked far too heavy for one person. Luis approached slowly. Ellie. She looked up, startled. Then froze. You. Luis held up the bag. I brought food. A long silence. Her gaze moved from the bag to his face. The realization settled slowly. She knew. Not everything, but enough. You're the guy. Her voice was flat. Luis nodded. Luis Cavano. She let out a sharp breath. Figures. He opened his mouth, but she lifted a hand. Let me guess. The date was a setup. Your kid's the test. I'm the test subject. And this, she pointed at the food, is the reward if I passed. No, Louise said softly. This is dinner. For someone who gave away her bread. Ellie turned away, shoulders tight. I didn't ask for this. I know. That's why I came in person. To say thank you. And I'm sorry. She faced him again. You watched me, didn't you? He hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, from the mezzanine. But not to judge you, just to see how you treated him. Without knowing who we were. Ellie crossed her arms. And if I'd ordered champagne and ignored him? You wouldn't have, Louise said quietly. That stopped her. She stared at him for a long time. Then, with a sigh, she leaned back against the wall. I'm not mad, she muttered. Just tired. I showed up for free food. Not a fairy tale. You didn't get one, Louise said. You got me. Her lips twitched. Almost a smile. Then faded. And what happens now? You offer me a castle and a second date with your son. I don't know, he admitted. Maybe just a seat. At a table. With warm food. Ellie looked at the bag. Then looked away. You don't owe me anything. Louise stepped back. Gently set the bag on a crate beside her. I know. But I still wanted to give you something. Not because I expect anything. Just because you made my son smile. Ellie glanced at him, then down at the bag. Does it have bread? 2 kinds. I'm allergic to neither, she muttered, almost joking. Louise gave a small, grateful smile. Then maybe, she said, I'll eat it. Good. He started to turn, then paused. He liked you. A lot. He didn't say much. He doesn't usually. Another beat. Then he added, he put one of the cookies in that bag. Ellie blinked. The boy who doesn't speak gave me dessert? Louise nodded. That's his version of a speech. He left quietly. She didn't call after him. But when she opened the bag later that night, her eyes stung. Because on top of the napkin-wrapped pasta was a cookie, shaped like a heart, with a smiley face made of chocolate chips, and a note in blocky child handwriting that simply said, Thank you for not looking away. Nico sat cross-legged on the living room rug, tracing the outline of a toy car with one finger. It wasn't new. In fact, it was a little beat up. A tiny blue hatchback with one missing wheel cover and stickers peeling at the edges. But it had been his favorite since he was 4. Not because it was fast or shiny, but because it had doors that opened and space inside. He used to tuck tiny drawings into the back seat. Notes, sometimes a bead or button he found. For Mom, one said. For Dad, another. But tonight, he sat staring at the empty back seat like it was a question. Luis entered the room slowly, carrying 2 mugs of warm milk. He handed one to his son without a word. They drank in silence, as always, until Nico asked, Do you think she's mad at me? Luis paused. No, she's not mad at you. But I let her leave. Luis looked down. She didn't leave you. She just didn't know if she was allowed to stay. Nico tilted his head. Allowed. Sometimes grown-ups think they need permission to belong. Nico thought for a moment, then set down his mug and stood up. Then I want to give her that. Luis watched as his son marched to the kitchen, pulled open the drawer that held his markers, and rummaged through the junk bowl until he found a rubber band and a piece of tape. He came back holding the car, sat down again, and wrote something on the roof. Luis didn't ask, but when Nico finished, he held it up. On the top of the car, in blocky black letters, it said, "Now it's yours." And in small print on the side, "It always had room for someone kind." Luis swallowed hard. "You sure you want to give her that one?" he asked gently. Nico nodded. "It's my best one. That's why." They packed a new dinner together. Nothing elaborate, just warm pasta, garlic bread, and a chocolate chip cookie wrapped in wax paper. Nico placed the toy car gently on top, then taped the lid closed with a sticker that had a cartoon fox on it. Luis drove across the city quietly. It was past 10, but the warehouse lights were still on. This time, he didn't go in. He handed the bag to the night guard with a simple instruction. "It's for Ellie Morales. From someone small but important." The guard smirked. "Got it." Luis walked back to the car. He didn't expect anything, but he hoped. Ellie was having a rough night. One of the delivery scanners jammed. Her shift lead was grumpy, and her back ached in the way it did when exhaustion layered itself over hunger and pride. She was halfway through breaking down boxes when the guard appeared. "Delivery for you." She blinked. "I didn't order anything. Didn't say it was food. Just said it was from someone small but important." He handed her the warm paper bag and walked off, whistling. Ellie stared at it. The handwriting on the top was childish. Wobbly. She sat down on a packing crate, opened the bag slowly. First, the pasta. Then the cookie. Same kind as before. And finally, the car. She gasped. Actually gasped. It was clearly loved. Touched. Protected. And on its roof, those words. "Now it's yours." It always had room for someone kind. Ellie covered her mouth with one hand. Her heart wasn't just full, it ached. Because no one had ever given her something precious like this. Not even as a child. She was always the one who gave. Who folded lunch napkins into hearts for her younger brothers. Who stayed up sewing their Halloween costumes while they slept. But this was his favorite. And he gave it to her. She blinked fast. Then whispered, "You little troublemaker." Her voice trembled, but she smiled. That night, she placed the car beside her alarm clock. Propped it up like a reminder. Of what? She wasn't sure. Maybe that someone saw her. Really saw her. And thought she was worth sharing bread with. Maybe a seat at the table. Luis didn't hear from her. Not that night. Not the next. But on the third morning, when he walked into the restaurant, Marco waved him over. "Sir, there's someone waiting for pickup. Said she's here for delivery." Luis blinked. "Delivery?" "Yep." Said it's personal. Luis stepped out into the front of house and froze. There she was. Ellie, hair in a braid, wearing the same worn coat, and in her hands a brown bag. But this time it wasn't food she came to take. It was to return something. Or maybe bring it home. Luis didn't know what to expect when he walked toward the restaurant's front entrance that morning. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was hope. But the moment Marco said, "She's here," he felt something shift, like a long-held breath finally released. And there she was, Ellie Morales, standing by the front window, holding a paper bag in one hand and the toy car in the other. Not returning it, just carrying it. She looked up, saw him, and smiled cautiously but honestly. "Hi," she said. Luis swallowed. "Hi." A pause. Then she lifted the bag. "I brought something." "Food." "Not exactly." She handed it to him. Inside was a small lunchbox. Plastic blue. On the lid, taped gently, the toy car, now with a new sticker on its hood. "Round trip. Still room inside." Luis looked up at her. "He misses you." Ellie's smile wobbled. "I missed him too. And me." A long silence. "You scared me," she admitted. Luis nodded. "I scare myself." She took a slow breath. "But the way you listen, the way you let him lead, that didn't scare me." "He led us both," Luis said quietly. She chuckled. "He's got good taste in carbs and people." Luis gestured toward the dining room. "Stay. Eat with us." She hesitated. "Just for a moment. Then I have an hour before my shift." Nico was already at their usual table. When he saw her, he didn't smile. He ran right into her coat, arms around her waist. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Ellie hugged him tightly, bending down to meet his eyes. "I missed your quiet voice," she whispered. He stepped back, took her hand, and pulled her to the table. Luis followed, slower, unsure, but Nico reached back and grabbed his hand, too. They sat down together. No menus. No pretense. Just 3 plates, warm food, and the kind of silence that feels soft, not sharp. They talked. About little things. The cold weather. The best way to toast garlic bread. The fact that Nico's drawing of a fox looked more like a potato. Luis didn't bring up the restaurant, or her jobs, or the napkin or the toy car. Neither did she. There were no explanations. Just presence. Just warmth. When the waiter brought out the cookies, Ellie laughed. "Okay, now it's officially the best date I've ever been on." Luis raised an eyebrow. "Even though I didn't say a word for the first 2? "You watched," she said. "And sometimes watching is louder than speaking." He looked down. "Do you want another dinner? With us? No hidden tests this time." She nodded. "Yes, but not dinner. Lunch? Breakfast? Why breakfast?" She smiled softly. "Because I've never had one where I wasn't rushing. I want one where I can sit and breathe and maybe belong." Luis felt something stir in his chest. He reached across the table and gently tapped the toy car, still sitting between them. "Then we'll make space." Nico added, "Still room." When Ellie left, she didn't feel like she was walking away. She felt like she was returning even as the door closed behind her. Luis stood by the window, watching until she disappeared down the street. Nico came up beside him. "Is she ours now?" Luis smiled, knelt down beside him. "No, buddy. She's her own. But can we be hers?" Luis looked at the toy car on the table, at the napkin still folded in his wallet, at the boy who finally let someone in. "We already are. Some endings don't come with fireworks. Some just begin with a knock on the kitchen door." Luis was chopping parsley in his home kitchen when he heard it, soft, unsure. He wiped his hands on a towel and opened the door. There she was. Ellie, holding a plastic bag, a thermos tucked under one arm. "I brought lunch," she said. "You brought me lunch?" "Well, for both of you. But yes." Luis stepped aside, heart thudding somewhere behind his ribs. She walked in like she'd been there before, not confident, but comfortable. Like someone who didn't need permission anymore. Nico was in the living room, coloring. He looked up, then grinned, not wide or dramatic, just that small, quiet smile he only gave to people he trusted. "Hi," he said. Ellie dropped to her knees beside him. "Hi, Fox Boy." He handed her a sheet of paper. It showed 3 chairs at a round table, a plate in front of each. In the center, a small toy car. Each chair had a name. One said Nico. One said Dad. One said Ellie. And under the picture, in big, blocky letters, "My people." Ellie blinked hard, then kissed the top of his head. "You little artist," she whispered. They ate at the kitchen table, sun pouring in through the curtains. Nothing fancy, sandwiches she'd made, slices of pear, a thermos of her favorite cinnamon tea. Luis had never tasted anything so comforting. She poured tea for all of them. "It's not as good as yours," she said. "But it's honest." "That's better," Luis replied. After lunch, Ellie pulled out something else from her bag, a small lunchbox. Plastic. Blue. Familiar. But now it had a sticker on the side that read, "Reserved." Inside, folded paper, a cookie, and a note. Luis opened it. "I never had a table where I felt safe sitting down. Not until now. If there's still room for me, I'd like to stay. Or at least come back tomorrow." Luis didn't answer. He stood up, walked to the cupboard, and pulled out a clean ceramic plate. Set it on the table beside Nico's. Then poured more tea into her cup. "Then stay." That evening, Luis sat with Nico in the living room while Ellie dozed on the couch, blanket over her knees. Nico looked at his dad. "Does this mean we're different now?" Luis looked at the girl who'd once fed his son her bread and didn't ask for anything in return. No, he said softly. It means we're more. The next morning, the restaurant opened early. Before the guests arrived. Before the lights turned fully on. Before the music began. A table near the window was set quietly, no glitter, no name tags. Just 3 plates. And a folded napkin with the words, "Table for 3."